Welcome. So my name is Sammy Lyon. I am a real estate agent here in Los Angeles, Southern California. I came to this work as an educator. I worked in social justice education and I taught environmental justice with students for 11 years and ran school programs. And then I got really into real estate investing and how real estate investing could kind of be that pathway toward financial freedom, financial independence, building generational wealth. So I loved it so much that I ended up getting my real estate license, and I'm really enjoying helping people do that and getting on that path. And because of my background, I really feel like uh, the the tools to access real estate, purchase real estate, and use that. I mean, I think real estate is kind of the way that people build wealth in this country, for better or for worse. Those tools should be accessible to everybody. So I feel really passionate about, creating those, sharing that information and helping people understand, what do I need to do? Um, and so I'm very fortunate. I met Shiva a few years ago on a real estate networking website. We totally hit it off. We took a trip together and we now invest together and we work together. And he is also, so he is a attorney. He has a credit repair company. I love sending people to him because I know he's going to take care of them and just comes at the work from a very heart-centered place and really personable. And so, yeah, I asked if we could do this workshop together. And so he's going to be presenting today. I'm super excited, very grateful that he's giving his time. He's also going to put the link in the chat at the end too, to if you want to have a free consult with someone from his team. He's offering that today to anybody on this call. So very grateful for that. But yeah, I mean, I'm just really excited to be a real estate agent who's working with a lot of first-time home buyers and a lot of educators and a lot of folks who may not, already be in the real estate game, and kind of helping you guys figure this out. So Shiva, take it away. Talk a little bit about yourself and go ahead.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you, Sammy, for the introduction and for this invitation. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So thank you. As Sammy mentioned, my name is Shiva Bhaskar. I am a consumer credit repair attorney as well as a real estate investor. Based here in Los Angeles, used to be in New York for many years before that. I got started in credit, if you will, because of my own financial challenges and things that happened with my own credit as a result of my law school student loans. And I caused enough damage to my own credit because of things that were happening that could barely rent an apartment and do other things. And when I wanted to invest in real estate down the line, as things started to take off with my career and all, it wasn't possible because of credit. And so I started researching and sort of trying to understand. And then one of my childhood friends who I grew up with, Tony, who's now my business partner, he actually came from the mortgage lending world, and he was the co-founder of a credit repair company that you could say we're us a tier one or a sort of a successor of. But he came from that world and had that expertise. And long story short, after I learned about my own credit and all of that, we started talking and said, hey, if we sort of brought together my legal knowledge around credit and combined with what he'd done on the financing side and started a company and helped folks, we thought that would be really great. And so that's how it got started. And today we help people around the country who are looking to improve their credit, primarily for the purpose of buying a home, also sometimes for funding a business or purchasing a car. But yeah, my own experience with my own credit, my own struggles with it, and lack of understanding and challenges and all of that kind of drove us to where we are here today. We're really passionate about it because I think, as Sammy mentioned, home buying, being able to buy a home or invest, what have you, is one of the most, it's one of the most tried and true kind of proven paths to building wealth and, building some financial security. And so we're passionate about helping people access that. And I'm going to share a quick presentation, which basically designed to just give you some ideas around improving your credit score, share a bit of knowledge, and then we want to drive into the the Q&A and answer folks' questions and kind of help you understand or figure out around your own credit and around buying a home and all of that. So, Sammy, should I share the screen? Okay,
Go for it.
let me find it. Okay, here we go. Tell me when you can see it.
There we go.
Cool. Beautiful. Okay, so this is a brief presentation. I'm going to share with you a few ways to immediately improve your credit score, and also share a bit of information around how credit scoring works. So first off, quick little intro. The lowest at a FICO credit score, and we'll be talking about what a FICO score is. The lowest it can be is 300. The highest it can be is 850. Okay, and typically, when you're starting out with credit, it takes 6 months of data to generate a FICO score. And then as you build on-time payment history and you have accounts open for longer, then your score can rise. By the same token, if you have late payments or debts end up in collections, automobile repossessions, all those things, that can obviously set it back. So that's basically the nut in a nutshell. Now, one of the easiest and pretty much free, arguably, strategies to improve your score is to become an authorized user on someone else's credit card. So basically what this means is you find someone, maybe a friend or a relative or a colleague, anyone, a mentor, and let them know, hey, I'm interested in improving my credit score, and I'm wondering if you could add me to your credit card. But here's the thing, because if that person is anything like me, they're going to say, okay, but what about protecting my own credit? And that's a very understandable concern. They don't have to give you the card. They just need to add your name, and then they can hang on to the card. You're going to benefit from their positive history because depending on the credit card issuer, it will appear on your credit reports. So you want to pick someone who you trust as being responsible. They have a card that's been open for, I would say, at least 3 years. They don't spend too much on the card, meaning they keep their balance is relatively low and they pay it off every month, always pay on time. You want to find someone like that and have them add you. And if you already have very established credit, you have a 700 FICO score or something, then this is not necessary. It could help. But if you're trying to get a leg up and you just need a little bit more of a boost, this is a good idea. And what I want to add is there are services that sell this. Do not do it, because FICO is designed to kind of figure out or root out fraud. And if they think you bought it from someone else, it may not count towards your score, or it could have other consequences. So do not pay anyone for this. Find a friend or relative who's willing to help. It's no risk to them because they don't need to give you the card or access to any of it. And that's a really quick, free way to boost your score. And along those lines, if you already have credit cards, you want to reduce your balances, okay, to below 30% and ideally below 10% of the limit. So if you have a card with $1,000 limit, you want to keep your balance as of the statement date. They issue a statement each month. As of that date, you really want to keep it below 10%, so below $100. So your credit card statement is emailed to you, and right before that statement's issued, it'll be the same date every month. You want to keep that balance low. So one point I want to make here is this is not the same as paying off the card. Like what I've seen is, I'll give you an example with my card with Chase. Due date is on the 2nd of the month. Okay. So the due date is on the 2nd. And then basically the statement is issued on the 10th. So if I pay off the card in full on the 2nd, but I do a bunch of spending, I don't know, I go buy a new TV and new furniture and some online courses between the 2nd to the 10th, I could show a very high balance. And that's what's going to appear on the credit report, and it'll hurt you. And this comes up because folks often tell me, we had this woman we were talking to today. She said, well, I pay off the card every month. And I said, yeah, that makes sense. And I get it. But the problem is that some of these months, it looks like she's paying her rent or doing some other things on there to get points, and that's bumping up the balances, and that's hurting her. So keep it low as of the statement date, especially if you're applying for a mortgage. One thing that you could do is you could just, if you don't like using credit cards much, just use one card, show a little balance on that one card around the statement date, keep all the others at zero. That's one option. And the reason I say show a tiny balance is there's two sort of contradictory pieces of advice you have to remember. You want balances to be low, But if you show zero balance on every card, they might think that you're not using the card at all. That's sort of seen as a negative. So you want to have at least a small balance somewhere. Okay, that's a good thing to do. One option, if you have high credit card debt and you want to reduce it, you could consider a balance transfer card, where basically you move your balance to a new card with a new limit, and you have a period where that new card is interest free. Or you could use a personal loan. There's a lot of installment loans online. Credit Karma, NerdWallet, Lending Tree, you can go there and use that because the interest rate is lower. So you use that to pay off the credit card, and then you just pay off that personal loan at a lower rate. The only caveat to what I just said is you typically need at least a 650 FICO score already to do that. If you already have damage credit, this one won't work. But a lot of folks have high credit card debt, but they pay on time. If that's you, then this is a good idea. One thing I recommend, if you're to have a card you're in good standing on, your balances are low, you could consider asking for a increase in your credit limit, maybe 6 months before applying for a mortgage. That can help your score. So that's something that people do. And if you don't have any credit cards and you want one, then if your score is below 620, I recommend a secured card where you put up a deposit and that's your spending limit. And other than that, you follow all the same rules as above. I would start with a secured card if you don't have any credit, or if your score is below a 620. It's above a 620, you can apply with like Capital One, Discover, Citi, one of those. So, I know a lot of people are anti-credit card, and it's possible to make a lot of mistakes with them. But at the same time, if you know how to use it, it's going to play a big role in getting the score up and helping you get the house. And this is number three is a very mortgage specific tip. Okay. So when they score, the version of FICO that's used the version of FICO that's used for mortgages, one thing they do look at is if you have installment credit, meaning loans. So that could be student loan, auto loan, things like that. Now, unfortunately, a lot of us are burdened with student loans. So if that's you, then disregard this. But if you don't have any kind of loans, you might want to look maybe about a year before applying for the mortgage at getting a credit builder account. And basically what that means is that company has a bunch of funds. You don't give them any money up front. They set aside money for you and you pay them towards what they set aside. And at the end, they give you back money minus some interest. So there's a company called Self Inc., self.inc. They're really good for this. And there are some others. Credit Strong's another one. This is if you're looking for a mortgage, yeah, you're paying a bit of interest, but it's a great way to build your score, and whatever you're paying will really save you when it comes to your interest. So that, or when it comes to the mortgage rate, So that's one I like. Self.inc is one. And the other one is Credit Strong. Okay, now I can drop these in the chat as well. Now, credit repair. People want to know, what is it? How does it work? Give you a very quick synopsis. Negative items damage your credit score a lot. Okay, just a single late payment, 30 days late, can hit your score by 80 points or more. And we see this every day. And then collections, charge-offs, auto repos, judgments, foreclosures, all those things are even more damaging. So there is a legal process to potentially remove negative credit items. And basically, we use a federal law. It's called the Fair Credit Reporting Act, or the FCRA. That's what I specialize in. I not only do this on the credit repair side, but I have also sued the credit reporting agencies for violating it. So we use the FCRA to potentially remove negative items, even if they belong to you, but they don't meet all the legal requirements as far as being complete and accurate and having proof. We use that. With debt collectors, we use the FDCPA. That's another law. And also, if you're in California, the Rosenthal law. Those basically put a lot of restrictions on debt collectors' conduct. And if we catch them making certain mistakes, we can use that to get the collection removed and potentially even get you money. So that's what it is. I mean, the way we do this is by challenging and disputing negative credit items. You have a legal right, I should mention, to do all of this yourself. You're welcome to do it yourself. I think a lot of people do it themselves very well, but a lot of other folks, there's a lot of bad information online and it may not be clear. So that's where professionals like ourselves come in. One thing I will recommend, if you're going to do any disputing yourself, do not do it online. No Credit Karma, nothing on Experian. Send them letters by mail and do it that way, because if you do it online, you might be waiving some of your rights. So that's kind of one thing I would recommend. Credit repair companies, you need to do your homework. We stand by our reputation and we're very proud of it, but I think everyone should shop around. Try to look for a company that charges you for results, does not charge you monthly, because there's no guarantee that anything will get removed. That's why we do it that way. We charge only based on what we get deleted. But yeah, do your homework if you feel like this is an option, or something you want to consider. And finally, this is a really, really important point. When it comes to buying a home, if there's one thing you take away from what I said today, I hope it's this next one, which is FICO. That stands for the Fair Isaac Corporation. They're the major producer of credit scores used for mortgages, credit cards, auto loans, business loans, all those decisions. Now, here's why this matters. If you have Credit Karma, which a lot of people do, they don't give you the FICO score. They give you the Vantage score. And I like Credit Karma, but the Vantage score is a score that was created by the 3 credit reporting agencies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. It's not the score that most lenders use. There's many versions of FICO, but most lenders use some version of it, okay? And the reason I emphasize this is a lot of people look at their Credit Karma score, and it's way higher than their FICO score. And they use that assumption, and Sammy and I were talking about this earlier this week, actually. Folks use that assumption when they're applying for a mortgage that, oh, my Credit Karma says 690 or 670 or 650 or whatever, I'll qualify. And the FICO's often lower. So just be aware. You can get your FICO for free at freecreditscore.com, which is owned by Experian. So Experian.com, Discover gives it to you for free. So you can get it for free. Now there's a very specific version of FICO that's used, okay, for mortgages. For Equifax, it's FICO 5.0, Beacon 5.0. For TransUnion, it's Classic 04. And for Experian, it's FICO Score 2. They call it Fair Isaac Score 2. So these are the exact scores that every mortgage lender uses, okay, no matter who you're applying with. They take, there's 3 scores, right? There's your Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. They don't use your high or your low score. They use your middle score to decide A, whether you'll qualify for a mortgage, and B, at what interest rate. So your middle score is what matters. And you can get those FICO scores either from myfico.com. You pay like $39.99 a month. They'll give it to you if you want to know. Or if you want, you can have a lender pull your credit. That will have a little impact on your credit, but it is something you can do. And yeah, your FICO score, they don't release the exact formula, but it's based on 5 things. Your payment history, meaning do you pay on time or do you pay late? Okay, that's 35%. So that includes things like collections, repos, foreclosures, all of that. Not so fun stuff. So this is a lot of where we operate as a credit repair company, is getting that 35% stronger. 30% is how much you owe. Okay, mainly credit card balances. Your balances on student loans and car loans, they do matter, but not nearly as much as credit card balances. You really want to get those low, and that'll help you. Length of credit history just means how old your accounts are. The longer you've had accounts, the better. So where to supplies, as I always tell folks, if you have a credit card you've had for a while and don't use, try not to close it unless you're paying an annual fee. Just leave it open. If the company wants to close it, they'll close it. I mean, that you don't control. But if you can keep it open, even maybe use it once in a great while, that's really good because it'll stay on your report and it helps you. And then types of credit, that basically means, do you have a mix of credit? Do you only have credit cards? Do you have credit cards and maybe some loans? Okay, the more of a mix you have, that's helpful, especially when you get to higher scores. Like if you have a 700 FICO, going from a 700 to a 720 might involve whether you have installment loans, or almost everyone with a FICO score over 800, 90%, probably 80% of them have a mortgage, because that reflects a higher level of responsibility. So your mix of credit. And then lastly is credit inquiries, which is where you apply for credit. That's 10% of your score. And we all know when, if you went and ever applied for a credit card, you saw a slight hit to your credit, that's this 10% over here. And one thing I want to add for mortgage credit scores, typically all inquiries within a 45-day period, all mortgage credit inquiries count as one. So if on May 1st, I apply with one mortgage lender, May 10th with another, May 15th with another, for credit scoring, all of those should count as one inquiry from the time of the first to the last, if they're within 45 days. So like anything between May and June 15th in that example, you could apply with 20 lenders and they should all count as one. So it won't keep hitting your score. And the reason is because you want to be able to shop around. So those are the basics of it. I know I covered a lot, but the Q&A will help us dive into this. And then Sammy's contact info is here. For when you're ready to buy, you should definitely talk to Sammy. And then for us, ours is here, and I'm going to even drop my my scheduling link to speak with our team to have a free credit review. We'll drop that in there, and I think that's it. Wait, let me stop the share.
You can leave that up.
Okay.
Uh,
No, it's always just
It's all
distracts me.
good.
Sorry, but
Um,
I'll drop that link in at the end. But Sammy, um, should we get started with the questions?
Thank you. Yeah, we had some great questions come through, so I'll share some of those with you. Thank you so much for breaking that down, 5 main points. And I guess that was a question about, related to the if it's a credit hit when you get a new inquiry, is there a negative impact for frequently checking your FICO score?
Great question. There is no impact whatsoever to checking your own credit. You can check it as many times as you want. I will say that it's not going to change typically multiple times in the same day, but you're welcome to. You have a right to check it as often as you want. It's only when you have other people pull your score that there's any kind of negative impact. And this is a really good question because it's a big sort of misconception that's out there and a very understandable one. So yeah, you can check it as often as you'd like to. No penalty whatsoever.
Awesome. And then would getting added as an authorized user affect my credit score?
It will typically affect it in a positive way, which is why you want to do it. There's one exception to what I said. If the person who added you suddenly runs into financial trouble and stops paying, but there's very little risk here. I'll tell you why. All you had to do is call up the credit card company if that happens and say, hey, remove me from the card, and they'll remove you and it'll be deleted from your credit. So there's really no downside. If the person is carrying really high balances or paying late, just call the American Express or Chase or Citi or whoever and say, hey there, can you remove me? They'll remove you and it'll come off the credit within 30 days. If it doesn't, you can just dispute it or just hit me up and I'll tell you what to do. But yeah, there's really no downside in terms of that. Typically only upside as long as they keep paying on time. So it should help your score. Yeah.
Is it true that just updating your contact information with the credit agencies can up your score by 20 to 50 points?
There are instances where people do that and their score goes up, but there's really no correlation. Um, you know, it's not really. People often ask this, and my answer is basically no. FICO has said it does not, and it typically doesn't. I think people sometimes may do some of that, and they may see a bump in score, but it could be because of other activity. Our experience is generally no. We've tested it out, and generally doesn't do much, if anything at all.
So you can try it and
Yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah, you can try. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt, but I would just go in with, a reasonable expectation that it's not going to, yeah.
So we had a question that you touched on this. I heard that credit card companies can close your account if they see you've never used the credit card at all and have zero balance. Is that true? And is there a reason you might want to not let them close it?
So there's no adverse impact to them closing it, really. It doesn't negatively impact. Well, let me say this. The fact that they closed it instead of you doesn't negatively impact you. But them closing it, yeah, it'll reduce your overall available credit, which means that your score will often drop. Best way to avoid it is if you try to use the card at least once in a while. I mean, I have a few cards I hardly ever use, but once every 3 months, I'll try to whip them out and maybe use them once or twice and just pay it off. I would recommend keeping the cards active and using them because it's not going to, the people this is really important for is if you have 10 credit cards, it's less of an issue. But if your card with the highest limit is the one you stop using and that gets closed, that can hit you. So my suggestion is, and I've seen folks do this, keep a spreadsheet or however you like to keep track of things of your cards and try to use the ones that you don't use. Try to use them once in a while and pay it off for something you would have bought in cash or with another card. You had to keep track because you want to make sure you don't forget a balance or something. But I think it's a good idea to do just to keep them open so that when you do apply for the mortgage, because if they close it, it'll remain on your credit report for up to 10 years. But the limit you had on the card won't count towards your overall limits. So that can harm your score. So I'd say try to keep cards open and active as long as you can, if possible.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I have a Word document myself.
There you go. That's the way to do it.
Probably not safe, but it's called credit cards.
Maybe not safe.
But yeah, you got to track it, especially if you get to a certain point where you're kind of getting those bonuses like the cash back or the 0 interest for a year, or airline miles, like you want to track the date that you open that too. So
Totally agree. And along the lines, folks, of what Sammy just said, there's 2 websites that I love for that. One is this guy who calls himself the Points Guy, okay, because he just helps people rack that up. He's good. I mean,
it's
right?
serious
Like the
though.
Points Guy is really good. Yeah. The Points Guy, and there's one on Reddit called Churning, CHURNING, I think, and they do a lot of that. I have a friend who contributes on that subreddit and loves it. So those are 2 places to look. And yeah, if you want to, there's a lot of people, I mean, pre-pandemic and I'm sure post-pandemic, who you can pay for a whole lot of vacations and stuff using that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm not sure I totally understand this question. What's a good once in a while rate, like twice a year or quarterly? So
I think for using the card, maybe is what
okay,
maybe they were referring to, I'm guessing.
yes, if that's
Okay. I would, yeah, I would say,
yeah,
quarterly is ideal if you can do it. Definitely at least 3 times a year, I would say.
okay,
At least 3 times a year, I would recommend. Yeah.
cool. Yeah, and someone said I didn't even think about continuing to have access to that credit by keeping the 0 credit cards open. I actually recently I got approved for some ridiculous high amount on a card that I never used, and they were going to close it, and I was like, no. And I bought a sandwich so that I could keep that credit open. So
That's smart.
if you roll over your balances to another card, would it count as a usage of credit?
Yes, it would. Well, yes, it would, in the sense that they're now going to compare your total balances to your total limits. Okay. So let's use a concrete example. Let's say that I have a credit card with a balance of $4,000 and a limit of 15,000. And then I have another card with a $10,000 limit and 0 balance. And then I open a balance transfer card to move the 4,000 over. Let's say that that card also has a 10,000 limit. Now I have total limits of 10 plus 10 plus 15, which is 35, but I have the same balance, right? Which is 4, 4 over 35. The reason that it benefited me, though, is that now this new card might have like no interest for a year or something like that. So you can use that year to pay off the balance and kind of use that to sort of get out of that high interest debt. It sort of gives you a pause, you could say. So it does count towards your usage, but your usage would go down because you now have more available credit. The one caveat is you got to have at least a 650 FICO score, probably higher given the pandemic, to get those. It's really not something for the people who have any kind of negative credit history. But if you, or not much at least, but if you have pretty good payment history, yeah, it's a good option.
Awesome. And then related, would the credit card company checking my credit score count as an inquiry and affect my credit score, which I think you touched on too on the new
Yeah,
credit?
so account review inquiries, this is kind of a gray area. Some of the newer versions of FICO don't count account review inquiries where you've already opened an account. Some of the older ones do. The good news is that they do them pretty relatively infrequently these days. I mean, they do them because of COVID and even before that, but they don't do them more than once a year. So it can have a little impact, but typically it's not going to be much. If it's a newer version of FICO, you'll see no impact. I think even on the older ones, and this is always like sort of a gray area, like I said, even on the older ones, it has less impact than a regular inquiry that you did. So yeah, it can do a little bit, but it really, let me put it this way, it won't be the reason that your credit score majorly drops, you know?
Yeah. And a related question to the credit card, should there be a certain number of 0 balance cards that's more beneficial to have, more or less? Sounds like it's also based on the amount of credit you have open on those, right?
Exactly. I don't think there's a number really. I think more cards is generally better to a point. I wouldn't say there's a number. If you had 3 or my view is that the magic number tends to be 3 to 4. If you look at most people with FICO scores above 760, which gets you the very best rates and terms on mortgages and auto loans and all, most of them have at least 3 to 4 active open credit cards. So if you have 3 cards with 0 balance and 1 with a balance, total of 4. That's pretty good. If you only have 2 or 3 and, one of them has balance or, shows some spending, the others don't, that's fine too.
And then I think a clarification question, by adding an authorized user, are they only tied to that one card, not your whole credit, right?
Correct. Only the one card. Exactly. All they have is the one card, and that's what appears on there. Their whole credit. Yeah, that person could have terrible credit otherwise and have just one card that's good. It would be very unusual, but hypothetically, and yeah, you would still get the benefit from that one card, not the whole. You wouldn't be damaged by the whole thing. Yeah, that's correct.
And then you being on that card adds to your pie of your whole credit,
Exactly.
having an extra.
It does. And this is the other thing to add is it benefits you, but you're not going to get their whole, and that's a double-edged sword because a lot of people who add you as an authorized user will have very, very good credit. And you're not going to benefit from that except for the one card. Like you might have someone with an 800 FICO score add you. It's not going to turn you into an 800 as well, but it will give you some benefit. So it's a good one.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. We have some questions about collections and charge-offs. So one item that's been in collections for years, not very high, but haven't paid it because honestly don't know whether it helps or hurts to pay it off. We were talking about that this week too.
Yeah. So the answer is it depends. The impact of the collection fades over time. Okay. So if it was a 1-year-old collection, it hurts you more than a 3, which hurts you more than a 5-year-old collection. And after 7 years, it falls off. So the one thing I want to get out of the way is paying the collection typically does not reduce your score because people are like, oh, there was recent activity or it was paid. They count the date of last activity as the last time you paid when it went delinquent. So paying it is not going to reduce your score. Now, here's the benefit of paying it. Most companies will not delete it if you pay it. Sometimes you can ask and some of them will. And if they do, that's great. Then it's paid and it's gone. From a credit repair standpoint with what we do, we remove paid and unpaid collections all the time. Unpaids are a little easier, but I remove tons of paid ones also. So I'd say if it's paid and you're able to remove it on your own or with help, then it makes sense. If it's just paid but not removed, it still is kind of good, but this is really important. The mortgage FICO score still counts paid collections against you. So if you're applying for a mortgage and you pay off a bunch of collections and they're still all on there, just marked as paid, your score may not budge that much. It might go up a little and not a lot. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind is if you can get it removed, that's going to be a lot more beneficial. Now, the other flip side of what I said, if you have a collection that's several $1,000s, you got to be aware of lawsuits because there are companies that buy these debts. They sue very aggressively. And, we're here in LA County where I think the majority of the cases in civil court are debt collection cases now. Before the pandemic and even during the pandemic, now that things are reopening, they're filing very, very aggressively. So if you have a collection for like a credit card that was sold to another company and it's a few $1,000s, you may seriously want to consider settling it because they will go to court on those. And there are plenty of ways to fight them in court, but that'll cost you money with a lawyer and all. So that's the one caveat. If it's an older collection and maybe it's for a larger amount, you may consider paying it. But overall, if you can get it removed and while you pay it, that's great.
How do you get it removed?
Typically through the dispute process. Through the credit repair process. Sometimes you just get lucky and you dispute it on your own. It comes off. Very often it doesn't. And, the way that we approach it is all our letters are on an attorney letterhead. So, that's our unique thing. So, it's not a hard and fast rule, but paid collections are a little easier to remove than unpaid. But yeah, you typically need to do some sort of dispute. If you call them up and say, hey, I know I paid this, can you remove it? They often won't. But if you dispute with them or with the credit bureaus, often you'll get it taken off. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was a question. You said that you guys charge just based on results. So if someone were to get an old collection taken off, how does Pier 1 get paid? How does that work?
Yeah, so we get paid one of two ways. If we're able to remove it and that's it, it's $50 per collection per credit bureau. So if you had 3 collections and they're each on all 3 credit reports, then that's 9 accounts, that's $450. And then our setup fee, which is $297. If we don't remove anything, then the $297 comes back to you, but that never happens. If we couldn't do anything, we'll tell you and give you some other ideas to improve your score. So we get compensated based on that. We don't typically take something where someone only has one account. Our caveat is, because we offer that money back guarantee, there needs to be at least 2 negative accounts we're working on. The flip side to that is we will consider a situation where maybe someone pays us only if we get it deleted, but they pay a little more. So if someone just has one collection, it's a big concern for you, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll work something out. But typically our clients are people who have multiple, and that's what we work on. Yeah.
All right, student loans. So there's a couple questions here, but one would be involving student loans and any updates regarding forgiveness of student loans, if you're kind of in touch with that, and then, you know, I also like the different loans being in forbearance and people not having to pay them right now. So any thoughts on student loans?
Absolutely. So a few thoughts, a few things I would say. One, student loans. Right now, you don't have to make payments on federal student loans. At some point in the future, that'll resume. But right now, there's nothing, you know, for most federal student loans, there's nothing due. It's not going to be marked late on your credit. So, I mean, folks with federal loans are probably aware of that. Doesn't change really what you owe. I mean, you'll owe the same amount in the end, but, you know, it's giving you a pause right now. So that is positive. As far as forgiveness, it appears that the President Biden is exploring trying to do this by executive order, because it doesn't appear too likely to get through in Congress. The rumor is they're talking about $10,000. They're trying to go higher, but it seems doubtful. There may be some forgiveness. I wouldn't necessarily count on it, but what I will point out is that there's a lot of great programs like income-based repayment, where if you earn a certain amount, depending on where you live and what your expenses are, you can pay a reduced amount and have the rest of the balance forgiven. There could be some taxes you owe as a result, but it'll reduce your overall payments and save you. And if you're in a public service facility, like maybe you're a teacher or you work in a public hospital, or, you know, firefighters, police, that sort of thing, you can also get public service loan forgiveness potentially, where it gets forgiven after a certain number of years and you pay a reduced amount before that. So there are programs. I don't think the type of forgiveness that was being talked about by some, the huge amounts, I don't think that's likely to happen. But there will be some amount of forgiveness, maybe. But either way.
Yeah, right. I mean, you just gotta wait and see, I guess.
Yeah,
It's not like
we really
going
don't
away. And then, yeah, can you talk a little bit about, like, well, this is kind of a debt question and a lending question, but if you have a large student loan debt, but the actual monthly payments are manageable, one question about how that affects your credit, and then two, how does that affect your ability to purchase a home?
Sure. Great. Oh, right, I see. Okay, Justin asked that. Yeah, great question. Great question, Justin. So as long as you're paying on time, it doesn't really have a negative impact on your credit score. You know, as you reduce the balance of the student loan, it will help you a little bit over time. So like if you owed 100,000 and you take it down to 90, you will see a little bit of a bump in your score, not a huge amount, but some. As long as you're paying on time or you're in forbearance or deferment or something, you're okay. Where it will affect you with buying a home, though, is your debt to income ratio, which I know Sammy deals with all the time with clients, which is if the debt is too high relative to the income, then that means your monthly payment and how much you can borrow is smaller. Given that most mortgages are 30 years and not longer, then large student loan debt will impact your ability to buy a house. But typically they're looking at your monthly income and monthly expenditures. So if you could get your monthly payment down by income-based repayment or something like that, you know, then that's a fantastic idea if your income falls in that threshold. For a lot of folks who are like doctors and, you know, dentists and attorneys, the income may be too high to qualify for that. But if not, then you know, then it's beneficial. Yeah. So I would say look into income-based repayment if you qualify. Otherwise you'll be able to buy a home. It just might be a matter of maybe you, I don't know, maybe you put a larger down or you do something else. I know Sammy and the lenders that he works with would have some ideas there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few. So, I mean, in terms of the basics of the mortgage, and of course I'm not a mortgage lender, but is that they're going to be looking, they're really like, you might be looking at your overall debt, like I have 100,000 in student loan debt, but, or I have, you know, well, if you have like 50,000 in credit card debt, obviously there's some other stuff to deal with first. But I think that total is not really what's being looked at. It's your monthly gross income minus your monthly debt obligation. So like
Exactly.
what Shiva was just saying, even if the debt is big and you can lower the monthly obligation, then that's going to, it's basically a debt to income ratio, and it's usually around 45%. So you're not really looking at the overall debt, you're looking at the monthly payments. That being said, and I can let you speak to a lender who is very well versed in helping first-time home buyers, and we did a workshop too. If you are in forbearance right now and not paying your student loans, there's a different way that your monthly payment gets calculated, which may or may not actually work against you. So that's something to talk about when you're doing the pre-qualification process with a lender. Is talk about, you know, what's your student loan payment right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I had a question. Yeah, it's kind of back on this. I just mentioned it with the student loan and then the credit card. I mean, for qualifying for a loan, is paying off debt more important than saving for a down payment? Like, what kind of debts do you want to pay off first? Like, just general questions to prep you, which a lender can also help answer those questions, but
yeah. So the first priority should always be credit card debt. A, because it's high interest, and B, because it impacts the FICO score more. So if you can pay off credit card debt, that's priority one. Student loans and the rest of it, which are much lower interest. Auto, if it's high interest, and yeah, sure. Like maybe you don't have credit card debt, but maybe you had a low score at one point, your auto loan's at 12%. Paying that off will obviously help save some money. So those are all things that you can do. But credit card debt and the highest interest debt should be paid down first, would be my advice. Now, as far as saving money versus paying off debt, the answer is it depends on how much debt you have. You know, if you have a lot of student loan debt, then you want to think about how much of a house how expensive of a house, or how large of a mortgage, more accurately, you're looking to obtain, and then think about whether paying some of it off makes sense relative to how much down payment you want to save. So that's one consideration. But typically, credit card debt first, and then everything else. Obviously, you need some amount of savings, because even if you're going with the lower down payment, like FHA type programs, you do have closing costs, or I think at least sometimes you have it. And 3.5% down, I mean, in LA, Sammy would know the numbers better, but I was reading FHA loans that people are buying $800,000 houses on FHA. And obviously that means 24,000 or 28,000 down at least, you know, so it's not a small amount of money. So you do want to have those savings in order. Yeah.
And then you need some savings for when your sewer gets backed up in your new house or whatever.
Oh yeah, all of that will happen. And don't assume because it's the new build it won't happen. I see it all the time.
Even worse, actually.
Yeah, wood plumbing is much worse. Yeah, definitely.
And then yeah, in general, I mean, obviously, can you talk a little bit about like to get the best rate from banks, what credit score or threshold or range are they looking for? And then maybe requirements for FHA that might be specific, but like what kind of credit score do we need to be looking at, and how does that affect your mortgage rates essentially and ability to qualify?
Sure. So to get the very best rates, you typically need a middle FICO mortgage score. Remember, I talked about the FICO 2, FICO 4, FICO 5. You typically need your middle score to be at least 720. For many lenders, at least 760. Okay, so you need at least a 760, maybe at least a 720 to get those rates that you see advertised online, or the very best rates available. Those are usually for those. Like Chase, for example, will do it if you're over a 720, but many others want a 760 or maybe a 740. On the low end, for conventional, that's non-veteran, non-FHA loans, you typically need at least a 620 middle score. Okay, the rate will definitely be significantly higher, but you can qualify. For FHA with the 3.5 down, technically they can go as low as 580, but because lenders can get in trouble if they originate lots of loans that go bad later, they can get penalties. Most lenders these days will not do FHA for 3.5% down unless you're at least a 620 or a 640. Most of the ones I see are 640, especially given the pandemic. Some are a 620. So you want to do the lower down payment, usually need at least 620 or 640. And then for large loans where you're buying a $2 million or $3 million house, typically jumbo loans need at least a 680 to 700 to qualify where it's a larger loan. Yeah. So obviously if you're over 720 or over 760, that's the best rates. But if you just want to get in the door, then at least those amounts. Yeah.
That was actually one of the questions. How do I go from a good or great score to a super duper score?
Yeah, we get this one all the time. A few things. You can have good credit and have credit card high balances. Pay those down. Okay. The other thing is, and this is not an answer people like, but honestly, just wait, because the longer your accounts are open, that's a big factor into really high. The 760 plus scores, they usually have a bunch of accounts that have been open for at least 7, 8, 10 years. Okay. And over 800 or 810, even more so. So to a degree, you might just have to wait. Because you wouldn't have a good credit score if there's anything negative. So it would be more about not applying for credit too often, keeping accounts open, having several active accounts, and doing it that way. That's what you would need. Yeah, you might just have to sit tight and wait. But if you have good credit, you shouldn't hesitate to buy a house. I mean, is it true that you might save between, I don't know, 3.6% interest and 3.3? Yeah, but you got to calculate. We're in Southern California and home prices seem to, even in 08, they didn't drop as much as people would have thought in LA County, at least. So, that's something to keep in mind. I would say as an investor myself is be aware that, yeah, you might get a lower rate, but it's not going to do you much good if the house costs 5 or 10% more.
True. Yeah. But those rates, yeah, having those rates go up does affect you a lot in a high price market like Los Angeles. So
yeah, it does.
And I guess, yeah, well, one of the questions was of the things you were talking about, what works the fastest? I don't have any credit cards currently. Should I get one to build credit? And then generally, what works the fastest?
Fastest would be get someone to add you as an authorized user and then open your own. Now, here's why I say do both of those. They do treat being an authorized user versus your own cards a little differently. Your own cards are counted a little more heavily. So you should try to become an authorized user if possible, and then open your own cards. If you don't have any credit, start with a secured card. I would say Discover, Capital One, those are good ones to start with. If you have some credit, maybe you have some loans and your score is decent, then yeah, you can do unsecured like Citi or Capital One or one of those. But yeah, get someone to add you. And even if you can't do that, open at least a few cards. And it's not overnight. I mean, someone who's brand new to credit can probably be in a position to buy a house in about a year, 10 months to 12 months, typically about 12 months. But under 6 months, they can't even generate a FICO score. So anyone who doesn't use credit and you're looking to buy a home, it's totally doable. Just, start today and assume that maybe next spring or something, you'll be closing, Yeah.
And what are some ways to get a secured card? Where do you get one of those?
Yeah, a few places. You can just Google Discover secured credit card or Capital One secured credit card. The other websites I like, and I'll drop them in the chat, are nerdwallet.com. Lending, and the other one is Credit Karma. You can apply through there if they recommend it to you. But yeah, NerdWallet is one of my favorite for not just card recommendations, but personal finance in general.
Cool. And this I think is also a lending related question, but do you have any tips for people who are self-employed, solopreneurs? I think a lot of us are moving in that direction away from the W-2.
Sure.
Credit related and
I do. So one big one is
separately.
Always have your personal credit in order. Make sure it's strong, because I mean, you never want to use it for an emergency, but just even with business lending where you're not getting a personal guarantee, they'll still look at it. It's really a factor. Okay, so that's the first thing that you want to keep in mind. The second thing is keep your business and personal credit separate. My recommendation is, and I have a blog post on this, which I can try to find and drop in there. But start building business credit from day one. Okay, like that means getting a business website, a business email address, a business phone number. You can use a virtual address. Try not to use a house or PO box. All of those things are used to factor into your business credit. There's a website called listyourself.net. Register on there. Just do things to build business credit. You can use stuff like Office Depot, Uline, Quill. These are all small business sort of friendly cards. You don't use your personal social, you use your business one. So I'd start building business credit in your entity as soon as possible. But either way, make sure the personal credit's in order for sure.
Cool. Yeah, great. So have that. And then generally, lenders are going to be asking for about 2 years of business credit if you're self-employed. So you can either be a sole proprietor or have an LLC. But so folks who are kind of thinking about exiting the W-2 JOB world, think hard about that if you're also thinking about buying a house. Maybe buy the house before you leave the job, and then you can start your business later. But I've definitely had some folks not realize that, and they just started their business. The business is actually super successful, but they want 2 years of history. So that's putting you on a 2 year. There are some lenders who maybe work around that, but generally lenders will want 2 years. So you just have to
it's often tricky because a lot of self-employed folks want to keep money into business and not overpay themselves. I mean, maybe for an exit or wait till it's stable. So that's tricky because obviously I know there's a variety of programs and some lenders may work with different things. But yeah, that's one that we run into is they show a really low salary, even though the business is throwing off crazy cash flow and they own the business. I know they could tap into it to buy a house, but the salary doesn't really reflect it. And so the lenders have issues. And I'm sure, Sammy knows a lot of lenders. I think they can work with it, but yeah, something to keep in mind.
Right. What effect does a tax lien have on your credit?
Sure. So some good news, they stopped reporting tax liens in 2016. Tax liens and judgments no longer appear on your 3-bureau credit reports. The reason that happened, and I'll speak from personal experience because I actually had a state one from the state of New York for a few $100. It was the stupidest thing. Paid it, but it was on there. They had a lot of things where the courts don't have your social and all of that typically on file in the court records. So a lot of people with similar names were getting mismatched and liens that were not theirs were going on their credit. So they reached an agreement to stop reporting tax liens. With that said, it does show up in your public records if they run a public record search, which every home lender does before you close. It'll show up on there. So you have a tax lien. It may not impact your FICO score, but you should still get it resolved because it'll show up in a search of your debts and your all of that, because they're aware that it doesn't show up on the credit, so they do check it, and that can impact you for sure.
Awesome. That's good to know.
Yeah, and what Sammy said, Mooney Krishnan, I see he's there. If you have tax questions, touch base since we're on the tax topic. I don't deal with tax too much because of this, but yeah, we have some folks here who can help.
Yeah, definitely some folks have tax debt, and Mooney can knock them down, call the IRS and make it go away. But good to know about that on the credit. Yeah. And then would you recommend consolidating credit card debt onto a low interest loan?
I think it's often a good idea. The two things I would say are, don't do it right before applying for the mortgage. Make sure you've had it open for at least 8 or 9 months, because otherwise the impact of the inquiry and the new account will hit you. And number two, don't do it because you're having a problem with cash flow and you're in debt, okay? Meaning, if you have a steady job and steady everything and this will help you save money, then do it. But don't do it because you maxed out your cards and now you need to spend more on the cards. If that's the case, then, whether it's looking at another job or honestly, even if you're over debted of bankruptcy. But yeah, I would do it only to sort of save money when you're financially stable with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'll drop that quick link in there about the business credit that we have on our website. These are tips to help you build some business credit, since Sammy brought up that topic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been very common. I was speaking to a business attorney a couple of weeks ago, and he said that in 2020, he's had more business than ever. I think in the pandemic time, I think people have shifted their priorities, and a lot of people, I think, who've wanted to start a business and just
Mhm.
finally found that inspiration or the time, or I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of kind of small business solopreneurship happening. And so definitely check that link out in terms of making sure that the business also has some credit, because that opens up a whole other line of, business credit. And we know a great commercial lender, Nelson, who would be able to, is he on here?
Nelson's
He's not
here.
here. Hey, Nelson, who can, help support people with their businesses too. So um, reach out to Nelson Adevalo in the chat too if you're starting a business or want to look into that. So yeah, definitely thinking about credit like more broadly than just, our personal credit. But then once you're kind of in terms of that question of how to go from great to super duper, it's like now you're really focusing on building your business credit, and that's going to open up a whole other world for you. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think in terms of like the lending and credit, I think what Shiva was just talking about is kind of like, all right, if you're thinking about buying a house, some of the first things you should do is just deal with, I know, whatever the things are on your credit that like have maybe been lingering, or if you have tax debt or whatever, just call, get a free consult, and just like face it, do the
Yeah.
inner work, deal with it. Now's kind of the time to just like, all right, clean it up. And then because like he mentioned, it's going to take at least 6 months, maybe a year to sort of get things cleaned up and rolling. And then
Yeah.
also talk to a lender. I would definitely always recommend people just call a lender. You're not wasting their time. If you are actually interested in buying a house, you may not be ready today, but you will be. And if they're a good lender, they'll follow up with you and check in on how you're doing, and also help create a plan with you. Like some of the questions that Shiva was just answering about, do you want to pay off the credit card debt first or whatever? Like you're going to have those questions with Shiva, but you may not be in a credit repair situation, right? So you may be actually having these conversations with your lender. And so you want to be kind of on a plan with a goal. So I always recommend call folks, reach out early on, even if you don't think you're ready, because then you have, otherwise it's like, I don't know, I have this credit card, should I pay that? It's just like all jumbled up versus just here's how you game the system. These are the ways that will get you ready. And then you just have to kind of execute that plan. It's really not so much like wondering anymore. So that's always my recommendation, is talk to a lender. And then of course, I'm available. Shiva also is very familiar with real estate investing and getting involved in real estate. So we're both always available for questions on, okay, if you're now feeling ready to buy something, then I'm happy to walk you through that part. But pretty much the credit and the lending are going to be your first steps. And I think it's just dealing with it. If
Yep.
there's something
Yep.
to deal with.
Yeah.
Do you
No,
have any thoughts?
absolutely. I agree completely. I think it's a journey. I think you got to be easy on yourself with it and give yourself time. The best things that you can do are, don't rush in. So meaning, we have people who say, hey, they get the idea, I want to buy a house because people are doing it. And they haven't looked at their credit in 2 years. And then they're like, oh my God, such bad shape. What do I do? And then they call us and they're like, hey, I want to buy in 5 months. And we say, well, look, most people take 6 months in our program. Okay. And so it's going to take it may be sooner, but it'll take 6 months, possibly a little more. And in general, if you don't have a lot of good credit, then you need to build that. So that'll take a year. So just give yourself some time and remember that, it's very possible to get there. I mean, I've seen people go from no score to owning a home in 12 months. I've seen people go from mid 500s to high enough to qualify for a home in 9 or 10 months. All those things happen. You just have to, you know, really give yourself some time and educate yourself. There's a lot of good resources out there. With us, I mean, obviously, yeah, we make money when people sign up for credit repair. That's true. That's one of the ways. But we just like to share a lot of educational content in general. I think there's a lot of other sources out there as well. So just educate yourself. The one thing I'll say is, be careful of what's on the internet, okay, when it comes to this, because I go on YouTube and other places, and I mean, we had a client call us who saw something on TikTok that this one letter will delete everything from your credit report, and he didn't believe it, but the point being that there's just a lot of bad information out there. So do the research. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're always happy to answer the question. And yeah, you can do it. Go forward, and keep in mind another thing I'll add, folks, with credit repair. There's a whole lot of things that debt collectors do wrong, and the credit card companies and others do wrong. You'd be surprised how many cases there are where someone comes to us for credit repair, but they actually end up walking away with money because we find something a debt collector did, and us or one of the partner attorneys sues them and gets a little money for the person, which often offset the cost of credit repair. So point being, I wouldn't assume that, but if you're being harassed by collectors and you're having challenges with that, definitely consider talking to a professional, because there is a lot of recourse.
Thank you. And then big question, is that information you shared going to be available via email?
Oh yeah. I know you recorded the presentation that I put up. I can share with anyone. Just shoot me an email. It's up there. I can share that, or if you have a specific question, I'm happy to answer. And we're on, all over. I mean, we write a lot of articles, and how we're on YouTube and all that. Not as much on YouTube, but we're on YouTube and Instagram and elsewhere. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. I work a lot of home buyers, honestly. A lot of lenders I work with, we just tell them, hey, your person doesn't need credit repair. They just need to build a little credit. So we'll always try to give you an honest opinion on that. And overall, I'd say there's almost no situation you can't, with time and effort, you can't come back from. Really, there's not. I mean, the fact that if you look at where I had a 514 FICO score at one point, and now I own rental properties, I mean, that would be absurd on its face if anyone said it, but it happened. And it wasn't that long ago we're talking about either. Okay. About 5 years, 6 years ago. So, I mean, yeah.
That's awesome. Can't think of a better way to end than that. So thank you, everybody. Shiva's contact information is in the chat. It'll also be with the replay. I have everybody's contact information who registered, so I'll send that video out as well, and you can reach out to Shiva for the presentation. And yeah, thank you everybody so much. I wish everybody prosperity and health in 2021 and good credit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me, Sammy.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.